to defending the criminally accused and upholding the civil rights of those who have been wronged by the police. We're going to have Sonia Mehta, who is a trial attorney representing individual employees, labor unions, and community organizations. She's a dedicated and strategic advocate for workplace fairness and social justice. And she's currently representing DxE in her case against Whole Foods. And Bonnie Clapper defends people accused of federal crimes and serves on DxE's legal team, where she has written legal opinions on the right to rescue and supported activists on legal advice. So let's welcome them all. All right, thank you all for being here today. Welcome to the first day of ALCC. I think Jake's asking me to use the other mic, so I think it's that one. Check. All right, we got it. I get the wireless mic, or the one with the wire. Yeah, thank you all for being here today. And like Tanya said, I'm one of the 6 felony defendants facing 8 felony charges. And just last week, somebody asked me, Priya, how do you always have a smile on your face? You're facing so many charges. It's not me. It's this dream team of lawyers that we have. Not all of them are up here, but it's because of you all that we feel confident. I don't feel like I have anything to worry about because we have Bonnie, Sonia, Isaac, and some of our other lawyers who aren't here today. And we have a lot of questions for you all today, so I hope that you're ready. So should we get started? All right, so my first question is for Isaac. And just so you all know, last year, 1 year ago, in fact, tomorrow, September 29th, is when 58 of us were thrown in jail at Petaluma Poultry after we exposed criminal animal abuse happening at this facility. And we were just like, who's going to represent us? I mean, which lawyers? Like 58 activists just got thrown in jail. Anybody? And then I just remember when you walked in, Isaac, and it was just like the answer to all of our prayers. And we were kind of like, who is this person who is excited about representing 58 activists? So give Isaac a huge round of applause. And one more thing before the first question for you, Isaac. The way we found Isaac was like so ironic. Wayne was in jail, and he's as a talkative person, he's talking. You know, one of the other inmates who's
Brad, that was his name.
All right, so Brad, and then he's talking about this amazing lawyer who he hasn't even paid, and he's like, I don't even know why he answers my calls. He's always there for me. And then Wayne got Isaac's information, and right when he got out of jail, he's like, I have something exciting to tell you, Priya. And then we got in touch with you, Isaac. That is how we found you. So with that, how often do you get to represent clients who are proud of their crimes, and so yeah, how often do you get to represent clients who are proud of their crimes? And yeah, I guess let's just start there. That's a big question.
So I think over the last many years, I've always had somebody that I was working with who was arrested in their capacity as an activist or a protester. And most of those folks are proud of what they did. Most of them are also very afraid of what's going to come down. And I think the difference with working with DxE is nobody's afraid. And that's a new and a weird kind of thing for a lawyer. Because one of the things I tell almost every one of my clients that I defend criminally is try not to worry. Worry is not going to make it better. Let me handle the worrying for you. I'm a professional worrier. And the relationship is kind of inverse working with DxE because nobody's afraid. And the lawyer's like, oh my God, I'm not going to get through this. And so I do have to remind myself that for the folks here, and many of you I have seen and I have met, I actually start becoming confused who I have seen in a video of an action taking place and who I've actually met in person. And in fact, Lewis, are you around? Yeah, he was around here someplace. I bumped into him this morning, and he felt the need to introduce himself to me. And I thought, but I know you. I've seen you in so many videos. But the difference here is that people are fearless. And what's terrific about that is it flips the paradigm on its head, where the punishment that the criminal justice system wants to use to deter misconduct is entirely ineffective when you have people who are not only accepting of the possibility that they could be punished for their actions, but embracing it. Those are not people that you can make go away by charging with a crime. So it is really an honor and a special privilege to represent people.
Yeah, I was just thinking, imagine the anxiety when it's like, okay, for the lawyers, when we are investigating these farms just a year ago, we got these charges, and then just a few months ago in May, we went right back to Sonoma County. How did you feel when that happened?
It's so I have this dialogue, of course, with the county prosecutor's office, and increasingly the members of DxE are being referred to as jihadis, and it's not entirely inappropriate. It's because what we have is people, again, they're not afraid of what's going to happen to them for following the conviction of their hearts, and that is what makes you a really difficult enemy to fight. There's only so many tools that the system has to suppress dissent. And when you are not afraid of those tools, they become entirely ineffective. So there's a great future for this organization. What you're doing is tremendous, and I would say, when you come back for more, although from, say, the lawyer perspective, that makes a tremendous amount of work, it also helps us communicate your bravery to the other side, and that's not lost on anyone.
Thanks, Andrew. All right, my next question is for Bonnie, and a little backstory on Bonnie. Not too long ago, we got an email from someone, and it was just like a really nice email saying, hey, I'm a former U.S. attorney, and I want to help out, and we were just like, what? Really? And then I remember Eva was like, oh my gosh, I just talked to Bonnie, and she's amazing, and she wants to help with our cases, and it was like an answer to our prayers. So thank you so much, Bonnie, because ever since you joined, I know that I've benefited, because when I was thrown in jail after disrupting Jeff Bezos, when I was in jail, someone was like, yeah, we got you a good lawyer, and it's all because of Bonnie, and this person's represented Britney Spears. I don't know what she was doing in Vegas, but works for me. So yeah, my question for you, Bonnie, is that you're the author of a legal opinion that activists have been using to argue that we have the legal right to enter property where animals are being criminally abused, and that our actions are legally justified based on California Penal Code 59070 and the legal necessity defense. Can you just briefly explain to the audience just a little bit about the necessity defense and California Penal Code 59070?
Yes, and hopefully now you can avoid reading the opinion if I summarize it. I just want to start by saying I was a vegetarian for many years. I didn't know. I don't want to start crying. But a good friend of mine, who many of you know, Donnie Moss, I approached him one day and I said, Donnie, I've been in the criminal justice system for 32 years. I want to help animals. What can I do? And he said, you can do two things. You can sit here and watch these videos with me of a dairy farm and an egg farm, and you can reach out to DxE. And I am humbled by the welcome I received, honored to be able to be part of this. I apologize that it took me so long to get here, but I'm here for the long haul, so thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie.
So the necessity defense is a common law defense. What does that mean? In most states, it's not even codified. In California, it is codified, meaning it's written down in the law. But there are elements of the necessity defense that, if they are met, it gives a defendant a right to argue, I had no other choice. My actions were necessary. So what's the good and the bad of the necessity defense? The tough thing is you have to first get a judge's permission to let you use the defense. I remember too many years ago that I don't want to tell you, when I was a law clerk in Los Angeles, my judge, Judge Wallace Tashima, was trying a case of nuns, nuclear activists that were chaining themselves to nuclear facilities. And they asked to do a bench trial, meaning no jury, and the judge said, research the necessity defense. So this is 32 years ago. And I came back and I told the judge, these are the elements. And he said, I'm not going to let it in. It's not appropriate. And I remember saying, Judge, we have First Amendment rights in this country. Give these defendants a chance. If nothing else, even if you're going to find them guilty, if nothing else, let them have their say. Because that's what this country is about. The judge allowed in the necessity defense, and he engaged in judge nullification, and he acquitted them all. So it was 32 years ago that I first learned about the defense. For activists, we have to believe, and we do believe, that rescuing is justified. DxE and other activists do excellent planning in the hopes that we can meet the elements of the defense. But we also have to be cognizant of the fact that there's a hurdle to even get it in front of a jury. I believe, this is my personal opinion, that if we meet that hurdle, there will be at least one juror who accepts the defense. And all you need is one. All you need is one juror to say not guilty, and the trial is hung. It's called a hung jury. The prosecution can retry the case as many times as it wants, but it's a lot harder when there's one hung jury to come back. And often what you'll find is all of a sudden the plea offers get a lot better. 597 in California is almost unique among states in that it gives you the right to enter a facility if you see an animal is being deprived of food or water. Unfortunately, it doesn't give you the right to enter if the animal's stuck in a farrowing crate and you can't breathe or walk. It doesn't give you the right. It doesn't give you the right to rescue, in that it's very limited to giving the animals food and water. But it does allow entry. So it's a good defense to a trespass charge. Of course, we want to save as many animals as we can. We take them out. That's not covered by 597. But again, 597 is more a way of getting our cases before a jury than anything else, because I really believe, and Isaac, I'm sure, has more experience than I do, once you get in front of a jury and one juror, that's all it takes, sees the video, sees the pictures, sees what we're trying to do, we've won.
And Bonnie, just a follow-up question on that. One of the things that, about 597E is that, okay, so we have the right to enter, and as someone who's been inside of a lot of these farms, it's impossible to give animals food and water because sometimes it's not present.
Right.
They just don't have it. They don't have that access. We literally have to remove them from that facility in order to give them care. So couldn't that apply to, couldn't that give us the right to rescue?
So if you get over the hurdle of 597, which is I had a right to enter because the animals needed food and water, now you have a trespass defense. When you bring the animals out, then we have to hope that the necessity defense will apply, because as you say, yes, we videotape a few nights before, we see the horrible conditions, we see the animals are hungry, we see they need food, but just bringing them food and water isn't viable. Then we default to the necessity defense.
All right, thank you, Bonnie. And my next question is for you, Sonia. And Sonia and I go way back. I think we met in the old OG DxE house, which was in Oakland. And I think you came to a potluck or one of our parties or events. I can't even remember. It feels like it was so long ago. And I think you joined DxE before we even had a legal team, and Sonia, I think, sat in on those first legal team meetings when we didn't even have any cases or lawyers. It was like, in the future, some of this stuff is going to happen, And so, yeah. And then we, one of the best things about Sonia is like when we call her and we're like, yeah, so we just went back to Whole Foods and now we're, they're suing us. Sonia's always excited and she's like, go get them. And on that note, I wanted to ask you about the recent depositions, and maybe you can describe what a deposition is, because I didn't know myself. But myself and a few of us, including Wayne and Almira, we were just deposed for the first time because we're suing DxE's, which is a Whole Foods supplier, and they're suing us back. And if you can say anything about the deposition, what do you think were the most fascinating moments, or whatever you can review?
That it's on. Hi everyone, I'm so happy to be here. I'm really honored to be standing here in front of you, sitting here in front of you. I'm so impressed by your work, and it helps me get up every day and keep doing my work to support you, so right on. Okay, so yes, so I have an amazing first chair in this false advertising lawsuit, Gretchen Elsner, who's in New Mexico right now. She can't be here today. But she brought a false advertising lawsuit against DxE's Turkey. So DxE's Turkey are these turkeys sold at Whole Foods and at, the organic natural markets. And they have this advertising of all the turkeys are at this idyllic Sonora ranch, and they walk around, and the DxE's family walks the flock, and there's goats and other species, and it's all so beautiful. And that's where all these turkeys come from. So of course you should pay 3 times the price. Right? So Gretchen Elsner brought this false advertising lawsuit, and in response, DxE's Turkey brought what's called a counterclaim. So they brought a counter lawsuit against DxE, because the foundation of the false advertising lawsuit was that people from DxE bravely went in to the DxE's Turkey ranch or barns, and they took footage. And in fact, it wasn't idyllic, and there were no goats, and there wasn't any sunshine. It was exactly what you would expect of an industrial agriculture location. And so because of the evidence that DxE produced, we were able to mount this false advertising lawsuit. So the counterclaim was DxE's against the activists, saying this is trespass and this is theft. And we had a series of depositions, and of course DxE's has these attorneys that also represent Whole Foods, so they're very big pocket attorneys. And they basically called everyone who was involved in the open rescue in any way, shape, or form to be deposed. And that's, of course, a lawyerly tactic to force us to spend a ton of money and time, even if someone, didn't even enter the property, nothing to do with false advertising, just because you were at a fence adjoining the DxE's property. What do you possibly have to say about false advertising? So we had a series of depositions, and I have to say the first thing that comes to mind about it is how incredibly, again, impressed I was with the professionalism and the articulateness of all of our witnesses. They were amazing. And then I took some notes because I wanted to make sure too. Sorry, paper girl. So some of the other things I want to say is that, so one thing that they used these depositions for was to intimidate us. They were trying to get all the information they could. They asked one of our deponents about the names of activists in China that we were involved with as far as going to the Yulin Festival, and I thought that was all about intimidation. They made every effort to find out the names of every activist or every person who's come to an animal rights meeting. They wanted to get our databases of volunteers and participants. So I felt this was an effort to intimidate us and try and creep into our work that we've seen the FBI doing, we've seen through Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act, where they're trying to intimidate us. And like Isaac said, it's amazing how unintimidatable we are. So let's see. I thought one thing that was interesting is they did their best to divide and conquer the lawyers and the activists. So they would tell our activists, you don't have to listen to Sonia. When I would be objecting, I'd say, yes, they do. And of course, the activists are saying, well, that's my attorney, so I'm going to listen to her. And I thought it was really interesting. It seems like a tactic that the right wing takes on every level, to divide and conquer and divide and conquer. And I was really impressed with our unity there. I thought we had incredible answers to stealing animals. So they were asking questions about the theft of the turkeys, and I think each and every one of our activists was very strong in their answers about animals not being property. and being proud about what we had done, and making sure to be clear that animals are sentient beings and that's not theft. And then I thought also what was interesting is a couple people from DxE were able to come to our depositions of the DxE's, and some very interesting testimony arose. So for example, Jared Orok, who is the president and CEO of DxE's Turkey, he compared stealing a turkey to as if someone had come to my office and stole a chair. So the psychology of the way they think about these animals under their care was pretty disturbing. And I think that's going to be an effective testimony to bring before the jury, because we will have a jury for the trespass and theft case. Although for the false advertising case, which is in 2 weeks, is a bench trial. Like Bonnie said, that's just a judge. I thought Heidi DxE's had a really good answer to comparing eating turkeys to eating dogs. She talked about how those are cultural differences and she doesn't judge that. So it became clear kind of how the industry uses messaging, right, to evade us. And I think that's something we need to grapple with and that we're doing a great job of grappling with. And then what I thought, and I'll end on this, is one of the elements to trespass and theft is harm. So they need to show that they were actually harmed by the trespass and by the theft of the turkeys. And what was so interesting is when I was deposing them on this matter, all of them could only say that they were harmed by the report and by the video about what was going on at their farm. So they couldn't say they were harmed by the theft of Sarah and Angie, the 2 little turkeys, or they were harmed by DxE stepping foot on their land. They couldn't say that. So it was pretty amazing that they were harmed by the fact that we're telling the truth.
Thanks, Sonia. I'm laughing because of one of the things that you said, which is that, you know, they're trying to figure out DxE's structure, and that so many more people joining that I was like, I genuinely don't know. We have hundreds of people, and it's just a testament to the fact that our movement is growing. And so I was like, good luck trying to figure it out. I've been in DxE since 6 years ago, and I mean, there's so many people involved in every single aspect of our work, and that just made me really happy. And another thing is, like, I could tell that they're trying to intimidate us, and I was like, most of us that you're deposing are facing 8 felonies. Like, one more trespass isn't going to kill me. I'm fine. Like, that's okay. So yeah, it was very fascinating to me. It's the weirdest interaction, the deposition. It's like, I've never interacted with anyone on this level. So yeah, I'm guessing more in the future, but we'll see. Isaac, so I know that you were a former Sonoma County prosecutor. I mean, you could have been Bob Wayner, the person who is prosecuting DxE activists who are who's bringing felony charges, and to prosecute us. What inspired you to switch sides?
First off, Bob has great hair. I could never do that. So I don't know if I could really be a Bob Wayner.
Isaac has great hair too, right?
So I worked with Bob when I was a prosecutor. And Bob is a talented, and I would say an ethical prosecutor, which is, just speaking with some folks before we took the stage up there, I said it's important, I think, to realize who your enemy is and who your adversary is. And there is a distinction in the legal arena, because while Mr. Wayner is definitely our adversary, I don't believe that he is our enemy. And in some conversations that I have had, I think that he has expressed some respect for a lot of the goals of the movement, and even for some of the actions. But of course, he's a prosecutor. His job is to enforce the law, and if he sees that it's been broken, he's going to pursue that. And thankfully, we have someone who is opposing us who's going to do it ethically, meaning they're going to follow the rules and trying to put you behind bars. And that's not always the case. And especially with a case like this, if we were less fortunate and drew a person who was less scrupulous to be an adversary, it would not be nearly the experience that it's been so far for everyone. That said, to answer your question. I joined the prosecutor's office because my desire, in going to law school to begin with, was to be able to hold people accountable, hold the powerful accountable specifically, and to defend people who were not able to defend themselves. That was always my desire. By way of background, before I was a prosecutor, I was in the United States Marine Corps for 10 years, and serving overseas in that organization, which is an organization which possesses some virtue, and which is deeply flawed simultaneously. It became obvious that you're not going to accomplish good in the world at the end of the gun. That's never going to happen, no matter your intentions. And so I thought, maybe we can do better. Maybe it's the law. So I'll go to law school, and I did. And I decided to join the prosecutor's office to do good. And when it became clear that that wasn't possible, given the political environment that we live in, that if a DA wanted to stand up, say against a police officer or a police agency because they were doing something wrong, because they hurt someone, because they violated someone's rights, it wasn't politically okay to drop those charges, because it was expected that prosecutors would always have the backs of police officers everywhere. That's what launched my private career into prosecuting cases privately of police misconduct. So for the last many years, we've been pursuing cases of civil rights violations around Northern California on behalf of people injured by the police. We were just speaking about this before we came up. Last June, we received a jury verdict for the family of a man who was suffocated to death by police in Sonoma County. As he's saying, I can't breathe. Right? And he was killed by the indifference of the police officers who were there. We brought the case, and it resulted in the highest jury verdict ever against law enforcement in Sonoma County. And so these are things, you can't change who you are, and values very seldom change. At your core, you're always going to be you. And so you seek to express that however you can. And I know everyone here is here because they're expressing your values, who you are. And by going to be part of the prosecutor's office, I was expressing who I was and what I wanted to be. And I wanted to protect people and do good. And again, it was just kind of a disappointment. Just like in the Marine Corps, you can't do good at the end of the gun. You can't do good, unfortunately, working for the government. There will always be that limiter. And so seeking to continue to do good, that brought my practice to where it is, and brought me here right now, because I think all of us here share a like-mindedness in that vision. However we interpret it, and whatever we see as that ultimate good, it's important, especially now in a global climate of hopelessness, where no one feels like they can make a difference, where everyone sees the horrible things that happen in our world to other humans, to other animals, and feels, what can we do? How can we possibly stand against this rising tide of darkness that's out there? And yet you're doing it. Right? So, it's been said by the other panelists, but there is a tremendous feedback loop that happens when we get to work for people who care so much that they're willing to put it on the line. Your own personal liberty, and what could be more precious than that? But so many of you have been willing to put yourselves in a position not too different from that of the animals that you've rescued, behind bars in a concrete box, eating really lousy food. You've been willing to put yourselves there for what you believe in. And seeing that lets me know that this is where I need to be as a professional, and that I have found a place where good can be done, where you can accomplish something that matters. And that's a long way of saying, well, I'm not a prosecutor anymore, but it's, I guess it's important for me to recognize that, the contribution that you have made, not only to the world, to animals, also to the lawyers that are helping you, because you keep our spirits afloat.
I think I'm gonna cry. No, seriously, thank you, Isaac. And for those of you who don't know, now Isaac is known as the go-to lawyer for police brutality cases in Sonoma County. Thank you for doing that important work, because we're not just activists fighting to change the world for animals, but also to change the world for humans who are facing unimaginable discrimination, like the really sad case that you just described. Bonnie, you used to, you were a former U.S., you prosecuted cartels. I was just reading last night that you literally prosecuted, a cartel that I think imported over 800,000 grams of cocaine from kilos. Sorry, I don't know why.
We don't get out of bed for less than 1,000.
Yeah, cocaine from Colombia to the United States, and like millions of dollars. And I mean, I'm going to go ahead and ask you this question. Do you see any parallels between cartels and animal agriculture?
I do. I did want to jump off of something Isaac said, which is when I first became involved with you, I remember a phone call with Wayne. I was overseas at a bas mitzvah, and Wayne was going to be representing himself pro bono at a trial. I got on the phone, and there was a clash, because as a defense attorney, my job is to keep my clients out of jail, and Wayne wanted to go to jail. Still does. So our mission, I think at this point, is not to keep you and Wayne out of jail, it's to support you so you can accomplish what needs to be supported, and hopefully get you less time in jail, or no time in jail if the necessity defense works. Cartels, big agriculture, it all comes down to one thing, and we're seeing it right now in the impeachment hearings. It all comes down to money. I used to train federal agents to do drug money laundering cases and drug cases when I was a prosecutor, and I would say to them, think of it this way. You're sending a kilo of cocaine to the United States. If I seize as a police officer that kilo, I've seized the equivalent of, $25,000 in the United States. But if I seize the money that you made selling that kilo, well, now I've seized your goods, I've seized the cost of doing business, I've seized your transport costs, I've hit you where it hurts in money. That's why as a prosecutor I focus more on the money end of the cases until the money led to the cartels. Big agriculture, unlimited amounts of money. Drug cartels, I mean, this is not the time or the place, but I could tell you stories. A defendant I convicted about 8 years ago, as part of his plea, turned over $110 million in cash in Colombia. And that's probably a small fraction of his criminal earnings. Big agriculture also has unlimited money. So both as a former prosecutor, now doing defense work, and also very much for the same reasons as Isaac. I went to Berkeley Law. This is my first time back since 1982, so now you know how old I am. And my first job application was at the Federal Public Defenders, and they didn't have a place for me. So I worked for a few years, and I became a prosecutor, and I too became a prosecutor to do good, to do justice. And I left also because with changes in administration, it became more and more clear that justice wasn't what I was supposed to do as a prosecutor. I was supposed to get the most harsh sentence, charged with the highest charges. There was no sense of compassion, no sense of understanding why the defendant is there, for what reason, and how lucky we are to have been in circumstances where we didn't have to resort to drug trafficking. So I think I kind of went in a circle, but the parallel is, with unlimited money, you feel like no laws constrain you. You feel above the law. And big agriculture in this country is so powerful that, like the drug cartels, it's not afraid. So just like the drug cartels, if you want to expose the truth, you have to take risks. Federal agents take risks, and I was fortunate enough to work more with federal than police officers. I have found in my experience that the federal agents tend to be more ethical, tend to be better trained. But believe me, there's plenty of them that are doing dirty tricks, and it doesn't matter to them. Civil rights, political. But if you look at what runs this country, what runs the world, sadly, it's money. And money, excessive amounts of money, breeds impunity, breeds a sense that you're not bound by any laws. By exposing what's going on in these farms, in big agriculture, as Isaac said, we are taking away their most powerful tool, because they can throw all the money they want at prosecuting us, they can throw all the money they want at civil cases, but in the end, when tens of thousands of people are on Facebook watching the videos that DxE takes of these farms, we win.
Thank you, Bonnie. And what you were saying is so true. We've witnessed it firsthand. When the FBI can, literally support and send out agents to look for two baby piglets and cut off their ears, that tells you about the corruption of the level of corruption in animal agriculture and about the resources that they have to expend. If they can literally call FBI agents and say, hey, can you do us a favor? So
I have actually seen that when I was a prosecutor. I think we saw it in the Jeffrey Epstein case. You have enough money, you make a phone call, and for me now, it's beneficial because one of you gets arrested or one of my clients gets in trouble. I know federal agents, federal prosecutors to call. There's no money involved, obviously, but every DA has to run for office, every sheriff has to run for office. Their money comes in agricultural areas from big agriculture, so they can corrupt the political system as well as the judicial system.
thanks, Bonnie. And Sonia, I wanted to ask you, as a lawyer, you fought against multi-million, if not billion-dollar companies and represented employees who've been discriminated against. What parallels, if any, do you see with the work that you've done for human rights and the work that you're doing for animal rights?
So I'm the one civil attorney on the panel here. And so my background is, before I became a lawyer, I was a community and labor organizer for about 10 years in San Francisco. Before that, I was a student organizer here, also working for economic justice. And in my work as an organizer, I organized young and immigrant workers, service sector, and retail workers to demand change at work sites. And for me, the fundamental principle, and just to say, why did I become a lawyer, is because in my years as an organizer, I would often ask lawyers, so what's the answer to this, and what's the answer to this? And they would tell me, well, it depends. And I got really frustrated. I said, you know what, I'm going to figure out what it is these folks know, and I'm going to use it to apply it to make life better for all marginalized and vulnerable beings. And so I went to law school and I worked for labor unions for most of law school. I worked for communication workers in the AFL and SEIU a little bit, and I also worked for small worker centers. And after law school, I was lucky enough to work for Dan Siegel, who's my partner now, who's a civil rights attorney. He's pretty well known in the Bay Area, who's always taken on the big cases, including police misconduct, all the civil rights lawsuits that we can find, including yours. And but the driving force here, and what I see as the parallel, what ties it all together is labor. I'm a labor gal. I've been so since I was born. And what I see as the parallel is that the 1%, the rich, what are basically our cartels, right? In my view, they steal labor, and they're doing everything they can to organize to eliminate the working people's movement, right? They literally are out there union busting. It's an $8 billion industry. And I think it's because they know that our power as humans is in organizing ourselves to demand the wealth. Like Bonnie was saying, it's about money. So they know that unions and the labor movement is the way that we, the people, get our money back and our wealth back, which is what we created. Well, how does this tie in with animals? I believe that the 1% and the rich are also stealing the labor of animals, quite literally, right? They enslave them, and they take their milk and their eggs, so they take that labor that they've created, down to taking the labor of their very bodies. And for me, this is all one and the same. It's all about the class struggle. And the class struggle for me includes the working class of the animals and the exploited class of the animals. And on that level, first we start with center the animals for a moment in the labor movement. Wow, and you can see exactly what I'm saying. But then take even a step and look at the humans in the animal ag industry. And it's a disgusting, exploitative industry to humans who are mostly immigrant workers, right? Just this week, Trump increased the slaughter rate, right? So, and already, and Obama did it too, they've been cutting and cutting and cutting the amount of time that a human being has to slaughter another being, and it leads to incredible injuries, worker injuries. I'm sure I'm telling you all something you already know, how many slaughterhouse workers have to wear diapers because they can't get bathroom breaks. Here's a great one. Now, do you all remember that this just happened this month when ICE came in and deported all those people at the poultry plant, and all those poor kids were going home from school and their parents were gone? Well, we cannot deny, and we must elevate, and we must discuss at all times the connection between using ICE to bolster the inhumane and illegal practices against employees in animal ag. This is how they keep the system running, off stealing the labor of animals, stealing the labor of workers. And to go a little further, since you're letting me, on another level, does anyone know who is the most murdered kind of activist in the world? Environmental. Yes. And why are they the most murdered activists in the world? Exactly, right? And it's because, as well, they are defending their land from cattle ranchers. When that whole the huge Amazon fire happened, those are because of illegal fires set by animal ag that wants to clear that land in order to continue to raise grain and create pasture for animals. So it's a very fundamental tie-in. Civil rights is animal rights. Human rights are animal rights. Labor rights are animal rights. And the only way we're going to overturn this unconscionable system, the only way we can truly challenge capital is for all of us workers to unite. And for me, that includes the animals.
Thank you, Sonia. And one of the things that, go ahead, Bonnie. I want to say, and I'm sure you know this, but I want everyone here to understand, all those hundreds of undocumented, they were locked up, they were deported. Guess how many of the agricultural facilities were prosecuted for hiring undocumented? Yeah. Exactly. So again, it all comes down to money. Punish the poor workers. I don't know if any of you remember, but maybe it was about 8 years ago, there was a massive arrest at a number of kosher chickens, I think it was chicken farms or it was agricultural facilities. And for the first time, and I think the last time ever, the owner was prosecuted for hiring undocumented, for all kinds of labor violations. And guess what happened to him this year? Trump pardoned him. So none of the undocumented are pardoned, but the people who have the money are pardoned.
Please. Yes, right? And I don't know if people follow the story of the human trafficking that was going on in an egg farm in Ohio, right? And talking about diesel, and I think PBS or someone did a whole special on this insanity because they need cheap labor to produce this cheap food. And But the other thing I want to say is, so interestingly, is that we found that Diesel Turkey had other lawsuits against it by guess who? Their employees for wage and hour violations. So it's an interconnected struggle, and I know that you all know that and carry that through in so much of your work. So.
Yeah, and absolutely. One of our values is to target systems of systems and not individuals. And to what you said, Sonia, whenever we go to the front lines, whenever we go to these farms and slaughterhouses, we always make it a point to say that nobody should have to work in a slaughterhouse. Nobody should be put in a position where they're so poor that they have to make a living killing animals. And the way that we can do that is by changing the system so that there are no slaughterhouses, there are no animals to be killed, and hopefully they can go work in places which are, producing more I don't know, tofurkey sausages or something. So. Isaac, this question is for you, and you've seen some of the footage of us walking out with dead birds from Petaluma Poultry, and activists, rescuing some of the sick and injured animals. One of the notable one who inspired this conference, Rose, who was the sole survivor of the action, so injured that she couldn't even walk, and she definitely would have been trampled on and wouldn't have been able to make it. You've seen all of this footage. You've seen activists crying when they were getting arrested, had the birds ripped out from their arms. Do you think seeing some of this footage has changed you in any way or made you think about animals differently?
Yes. I would say, though, to kind of get a running start with that question, that when I first came down to Berkeley to meet with folks who had been arrested from the Petaluma Poultry action, one of the first things I said was, I'm not an activist. And I am not here because I share the values of my clients. I'm not. I happen to share your values. But the reason that I'm here is because I want to work for you, because there is a very frightening increase in the criminalization of political dissent in this country, whether that's in the animal rights movement, whether it's in environmental activism, whether it's in advocating for the homeless, whether it's in any number of things. When you disagree with the power structure, they use the tools that they have against you. And that's not how a representative democracy is supposed to function. So my big goal in helping here is not the same as your immediate goal, although they're perfectly in harmony. And that is that while the organization is committed to the freeing of non-human animals and to the advancement of the very noble cause of animal rights, my purpose as a lawyer is to free people to pursue the ideologies of change that are required to advance our society without fear of criminal repercussions. And so it's they're slightly different but parallel goals. That said, when we got the discovery in the first criminal case in Petaluma, and for those who don't know, discovery just means the evidence that one side will exchange with the other. And we got videos and we had photos, and of course we have I think a lot of people have seen the reports from animal control that were contained in the police reports that we received that documented the abuse of the facility and listed the operators of the facility as criminal suspects in animal neglect. That was kind of important. When we got all of these materials and started reviewing them, you can't not be affected. You can't. I mean, I'm from Wyoming, right? There are 4 vegetarians in Wyoming.
I think one of them is here.
No way. Yeah, did the other 3 know you're gone? The point being, it's easy for people. I think I'm a smart guy. I'm an educated guy. It's easy for smart and educated people to be satisfied in their ignorance. And without the actions of DxE, I could have very easily been satisfied in my ignorance. But when you see the profound suffering of non-human animals. I mean, profound terror, really. And that's inescapable. That's, for me, you know, when we watch some of the videos from the Reichert duck facility, and I mean that was just ghastly how the animals are being treated. But what moved me the most was the fear that you could see in the animals, how afraid they were. And death happens to everyone and everything. We have a limited amount of time on this planet, but the right to be free from fear should apply to every living thing. So that day, I mean, it just so happens that the grocery store between my office and my house is a Whole Foods, right? And
Can't
so,
escape them.
So that day, I called Chandra, my partner, who's here in the audience, and you want to pick anything up for dinner? Yeah, you want to swing by the Whole Foods? I can't. And couldn't. And the other day, I'm walking by Whole Foods, and wouldn't you know it, but, you know, they always have the do-gooder with a clipboard out in front. And it's the ASPCA. And they're asking for signatures and donations. And I said, do you have any idea the kind of organization you're standing in front of right now? And he didn't. And so I said, I want you to look up this organization called Direct Action Everywhere. I want you to see the conditions that these animals are being kept in, that are being sold in this building, and then think whether or not the ASPCA wants to be asking for signatures here instead of someplace else. So it certainly has affected me, despite the fact that, you know, I come from a home where the buffalo roam, and it is, of course, a very different culture to be brought up in, with very different values. It's affected me significantly, and it has caused me to change the way I look at the world and the way I live on a daily basis. I think I'll end with that.
Thank you, Isaac, and I could just see, I could, you know, I was thinking back to being at Reichert Duck Farm, which, by the way, I was standing on public property. Myself, Wayne, and Cassie are now facing another felony for literally standing on public property. But I remember that same experience that you had, and I think that a lot of people have when we look into the eyes of these animals and look at their bodies that have been so brutalized, and you can't deny it. And I hope that some people on the other side, the prosecutors who are reviewing this footage, actually, I'm sure that they're having this experience too, because we all care about, you know, no one wants to see suffering, and I believe that to be true for the rest of the world too. And switching gears to you, Bonnie, in your career, you've been a prosecutor, a defense attorney, and now counsel for DxE. Is there a common theme against with these careers? I know you already outlined cartels versus big ag, but any other things that you've learned or seen?
I would say that all three careers have a common thread, for me anyway: justice and compassion. Much like you, Isaac, I joined the U.S. Attorney's Office for justice because there is a need for law enforcement. There is a need to protect people. There are victims of crimes that need to be protected. But I always felt, and I think the reason I was successful isn't because I was the smartest or the best. It was because I looked at every person I prosecuted with compassion. And people used to laugh. I used to bake all the time. It was a stress release. I have a multiple special needs child. I was working, and I'd come home, and it would be 11 o'clock at night. I couldn't sleep, so I baked chocolate chip cookies. Back then they weren't vegan. Now please send me your recipe so I can learn to bake like a vegan.
Wayne, as the
Please,
boy
vegan cookies. And I would bring the leftover cookies and whatever I had made for dinner that night into the interviews. And there I was sitting in an interview room with not quite at his level, but people close to the level of Chapo Guzman, bringing them chocolate chip cookies. And it just blew people away. And afterwards, agents would say to me, I've tried to interview that guy 5 times, and he never told me anything. He came in with cookies, and now he's talking. And the prisoners were joking in the jail, if she likes you, she'll give you cookies, but if she really likes you, she'll show you a picture of her dog. So I really feel, I don't know how many of you watch the TV show Orange is the New Black, but I have told young prosecutors, you must watch that show, because you have to see everyone you're prosecuting as a human being. How did they end up here? Why are they here? I remember prosecuting a major cartel figure who had been involved in the murder. When I asked him how many people he'd ordered the murder of, he started counting on his fingers, and I said to my partner, oh, thank goodness it's less than 10. Well, he was counting by tens. And, okay, I'm not here to judge you. Why? And he said, because my boss ordered me to, and if I didn't, I would be killed. So you really need to understand the why if you want to do justice. I switched to defense work because I felt I couldn't do justice anymore. And I remember the deciding moment was when I had charged a woman with laundering drug money based on the reports I read. I met her, and it was clear to me that her mental capacity was severely impaired. There was no way she understood what she had done. We went to court. Her lawyer was pleading her guilty, and I remember saying to the judge, Judge, I want a psych eval. This is not right. Usually it's the defense attorney who asks for a competency exam. I felt this woman is incompetent. And the report came back that she had a below average IQ, she had delusions, a whole list of things, but she was competent. And I went to the U.S. attorney at the time and said, I have to dismiss this indictment. This woman, I don't care what the report says, she's not competent. And his answer was, it's a negative statistic. If we dismiss an indictment, find something to charge her with. That was the U.S. attorney. And that was the moment where I said, I can't do this anymore. I started doing criminal defense. Isaac will tell you that sometimes as a criminal defense attorney you feel powerless because the government calls all the shots, especially in the federal system. People are afraid to stand up for their rights because the sentences are so overwhelmingly long. But if you try to do justice for your client, you try to make sure the government understands why is my client here, what led to this, and what can he or she do to show you that he or she won't do it again. I see justice and compassion in DxE. That is watching a video of Wayne where he began to talk about the plight of the farm workers. I see so many people on Facebook using horrible language, cursing the farm workers. And Wayne spoke on Facebook. I had never had a Facebook account until I was 61 because in law enforcement you didn't have Facebook. Donnie had to show me how to sign up. I still don't know my passwords. He has all my passwords.
Yet you share everything.
He had to teach me how to share, but I'm getting there. But to see Wayne speak about the compassion, not just for the animals, for the people, and the pursuit of justice. Justice for animals, justice for human beings, like you say, who are forced to take jobs. They have no other alternative because they don't speak English, or they're not educated, or they're undocumented. That's the theme I feel that has run through my life and that has brought me, fortunately, home to you guys.
Thank you, Bonnie. Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. We have space that are active. There are 15 people there, but there's always so much space. So just recently, and actually it's interesting, we're talking about Whole Foods, and we've been protesting Whole Foods for years, over 5 years, I believe. And I think there's a parallel between the fact that Amazon acquired Whole Foods and all of a sudden we started seeing charges, or we started seeing more escalation in terms of them pursuing, whether it's suing us and whatnot. Can you tell us a little bit about the injunction that Whole Foods is has ordered against DxE, and what does that say about what do you think they're thinking?
Well, I think they want the protests to stop. I think that the protests are effective, and DxE has been protesting for 5 years, and it wasn't until late last year that they sought to enjoin protesters from being inside the store and in the walkways. So what it means to enjoin someone or issue an injunction by a court is you're just saying you have to stop. So you either have to stop doing this or start doing something. And I think it speaks to our power, right? They're ready to throw down all this money, although they have more money than God, of course. But they want to throw down all this money to silence people. And, it's interesting when you think about corollaries, such as, for example, people protesting inside, for example, an abortion clinic, right? And, some people will throw out that example. Well, isn't the same? It's not the same at all. This doesn't have anything to do with individual health rights, right? Like a woman going into an abortion clinic has some health concerns and health rights that she shouldn't be interfered with. But what we're doing, going to the necessity defense, I believe, and that's the defense we're going to raise. Much like the climate change lawsuits, this is an issue that must be dealt with now in whatever way, in whatever peaceful way, which we're all committed to here, we can. So going in and protesting at Whole Foods is taking a necessary stance against climate change, against animal torture, against also trying to suppress activist voices. So that's what the injunction, I believe, is about. It's interesting because the injunction is also, the Whole Foods complaint is not only the injunction, which would only provide you with a bench trial, which again is just a judge, but they also included trespass charges. So very interestingly, a jury is going to be hearing about activists trespassing to Whole Foods. And I also just want to give a shout out, I got a lot of help on this Whole Foods defense. Aiden Cook went out and took pictures of all the Whole Foods because we made an argument that actually they were a public space, and because people can go to Whole Foods and hang out and you don't have to buy anything and they have cafes, we tried our best to expand. We tried our best to expand the public forum argument to Whole Foods. We didn't win, but we'll keep pushing. But I think it's going to be really fascinating to bring this before a jury. I'm excited to take the issue to trial about whether or not there's a necessity defense to trespassing inside a Whole Foods.
Thanks, Sonia. And yeah, you're right. Like, I actually, I love the vegan section at Whole Foods, and I would like to shop there, but they don't want me in there. And I'm a customer, and sometimes I get kind of loud with the complaints, but still a customer. Sometimes we have creative complaints, like occupy Whole Foods for a week, where we just camp out there for a while, but it's still a complaint. Isaac, how do you think the government and the industry might react to an increase in direct action, and how can activists prepare themselves for their innovations? I'm asking you this because, since last year when 58 of us were arrested and thrown in jail, we've seen that since then we've locked ourselves down to the slaughterhouse at Rykart, and as these tactics start increasing, what do you see the government and industry reacting? What do you think that might be?
Well, first off, and it's a nice little transition from some of Sonia's remarks here, that the industry would not be seeking legal remedies if they did not view your activism as effective. Right? So what you're doing is working. Otherwise, it's like, yeah, okay, don't worry about those guys. But in the same vein, when we're talking about law enforcement, and actually I think it maybe it's putting too fine a point on it to differentiate between big ag and law enforcement, because recognize that you're dealing with two adversaries who are very well equipped, very well funded, one of which stands to lose a lot if your mission is successful. Maybe we should look at their potential reactions to your activism similarly instead of distinctly. But this is what I predict. As direct action movements increasingly become effective two things are going to happen. There's going to be more legal challenges to what you're doing, either in civil court by way of seeking an injunction, or in criminal court by way of seeking to incapacitate you. That means putting you in the box. These, when we're talking about law enforcement, they have certain models of theories of prosecution, if you will, that have proved effective over time for organizations, for criminal organizations. Now, I don't think that most prosecutors' offices are going to be very creative in how they approach large-scale movements such as DxE. They're going to revert to what they know, and that is organized crime prosecution or criminal street gang type prosecution, which means they could, at some point, seek civil injunctions, as they have. Everyone knows that in Oakland there have been there's a tremendous amount of litigation surrounding the civil injunctions that have been brought against criminal defendants who are suspected of being part of a gang, right? And so after a while, you've enjoined a person from being in this block and in this block and in this sector of the city until you can't even live in town anymore because you have so many micro injunctions against you. And of course, we've seen in criminal action so far that as conditions of release, it's been required that defendants agree to stay away from certain areas. So we could call those like a micro injunction that even prosecutors can seek. We'll see some of that, but I think you can also expect, and again, this is as the effectiveness of the organization increases, and with that you will see the desperation of law enforcement increase as well. You will see they're going to go after your organization and people like you the same way they go after the gangs, which means that you can expect large indictments to show up all of a sudden, and you didn't expect them, right? And they will target specifically the people, and we already have seen this happening, that they believe are in leadership capacities, right? Because remember, a lot of how a prosecutor charges a case comes down to his discretion, okay? That's why Priya can be arrested for felony conspiracy for standing on a sidewalk, but people who go inside the facility might get arrested for misdemeanor trespass, okay? Because Priya's been identified as leadership. So they go for the leadership to, cut the head off the hydra, so to speak. And they're going to, and this is kind of the scary thing, and this is a really high-spirited group of people, so I don't want to bring spirits down, but I want you to start thinking about this. If DxE is to survive long-term, you have to understand that they will seek to put informants within the ranks. They will seek to take very well-intentioned people and put them in positions where instead of looking at 90 days because you were trespassing, you're looking at 90 years for something, and then flip you to become an informant on the group. Remember that as your organization is successful and your ranks swell, you get the benefit of really tremendous organizational strength that you have. You get the population, the ranks building. Next to you, less and less, individually. Okay. Everything that we've said in this room today will be reviewed by good government. Everything. It will be reviewed by police, by agricultural industry. It will be reviewed by prosecutors. 100% guaranteed. That's why I made that comment about Bob's hair. Just because I know he's listening. But so remember that your leadership in this organization and the fact that it is widespread and it's decentralized is really central to your effectiveness. Remember that you can't stop outsiders from infiltrating your ranks. You can't. But you want to see how activist organizations have been brought down in the past. It's always been the informants. Always. Every single time. Earth First, Earth Liberation Front, Greenpeace, all of these people have pages on their websites dedicated to the traitors. So, now, the flip side of that is, how can you remain effective if you can't trust the people that are next to you? And this is not legal advice, what I'm about to say. each other, no matter what. Be compassionate towards each other, no matter what. And don't be afraid, because perfect love drives out fear, right? It's a risk you're going to have to take. It's a tactic that law enforcement is going to bring against you, and they'll try to sow division from inside or try to get information to make you less effective in your actions. You can't be afraid of it. You have to love each other. You have to embrace what you're doing just the same and continue to move forward. But you do have to think about it so that when it happens, you're not as hurt, you're not as scared, and you're ready to move forward despite that. But remember, these are the tools of your enemy, right? So know them, be prepared for them, and be prepared to say it's okay. These things are going to happen. We are being attacked because we are being effective. The minute the government or the industry stops attacking you and stops trying to bring you down is the minute it's time to pack up and go home anyway, because you cease to be an organization that can get things done. Right now, you're in the crosshairs precisely because what you're doing is working. So, coming back full circle, I think that in the future we can expect that if you continue to be as effective as you have been, the pressure against you from the outside is only going to build. Be prepared for it, and view it not as something to crush your spirit, but something to embolden you and a signal that you are on the right path.
I think if we all go to jail, Isaac should step up and become the lead organizer.
Yeah, I think you would have to be. There's not a lot of money that comes with it.
Yeah, I'm going to add one thing
Yes,
to what
please. I was
Isaac
actually going to
said.
ask you about that.
So the district attorney's offices don't have the same resources as federal law enforcement. The real big problems are going to come when we are, as we are, in the sights of federal law enforcement. I can tell you, 25 years of prosecuting, no one ever said to me, you're spending too much money on an investigation. There's unlimited, sometimes they wouldn't want you to travel as much, but which is good because you lower your carbon footprint, but there's unlimited funds. And I remember a case many years ago where a supervisor said to me, we're going to make this case. And I came back and I said, but there's no criminal conduct here. And the person said, look harder, try harder, you'll find something. The feds, and I was a fed, so I can say it, they have unlimited resources, and they don't get raises if they prosecute more people, if they have more success. But there's an ego factor. I'm the agent that took down so-and-so. I'm the agent that took down Chapo Guzman or a bunch of other drug traffickers. I'm the agent that took down Manafort. And so egos get involved. They have unlimited resources, and as Isaac mentioned, they really have unlimited legal tools now. Because between the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act, RICO, which was originally passed to attack the Italian and the Chinese mafia, is now routinely used. And what it does is it changes the rules of evidence, which circles back to something Isaac said. We're all nonviolent, peaceful activists. So we don't have to be afraid of speaking to each other. But under the federal rules in the statutes they can charge, anything we say to each other is admissible as statements in furtherance of a conspiracy. I'm not worried because none of us are turning to each other saying anything that isn't the truth and that isn't just. The other comment I wanted to make, again, taking Isaac's lead, is the federal prosecution system, they believe that if they chop off the head, the organization dies. I go back to Chapo just because he's in the news. I was interviewed by the BBC a few weeks ago about what I thought the effect of the Chapo Guzman prosecution was on the drug war. And I said the effect is absolutely none whatsoever, because when you take down the leader, all you have is more fragmented, less controlled, and more violent groups. When you target the leadership of DxE, we don't want our friends to go to jail. But if you take down the leadership, there's 10 more of you. You take down 10, there's 20 more of you. So this strategy of cutting off the head, we don't have a head. We are all here for the same reason, the same purpose, and if you lock one of us up, 2 more are going to do the protest. So if you're listening, agents, it's not an effective strategy.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, they're always trying to eliminate us, right? I mean, they're always out to get the 99% and the workers and the people and the activists. I mean, we know that, right? And I want to say 2 things about that. One thing is that make sure to remember that the world is definitely changing. We're in a really exciting phase right now. McDonald's just released the PLT. You get the Beyond at Carl's Jr. You have made a serious impact in people's lives and the way people think about things. And I think the fact that we're out there putting out the video footage and what's actually happening to the animals is truly changing the world. People understand now that animals are being tortured. They get that, right? And even the corporations are being forced to respond to your work by producing choices where people don't have to exploit animals. So that's one thing is, hey, we are winning. We're winning, and that's why they're freaking out. But we're going to win, and we are winning. And the second thing is that I want to just say, how impressive and amazing and important and wonderful it is, all the leadership of people of color, of women, within the animal rights movement, and how important that is. Because this is an issue that, as we talked about, impacts communities of color in an outsized manner, right? From who's working at the slaughterhouses to who's getting food that literally kills them. So I think DxE, I appreciate the intense effort that goes into the leadership and cultivating leadership of people of color, of all the beautiful young people, but also accepting different ages and promoting the leadership of our elders as well. And so
Thanks,
I think
Sonia.
it's we just look incredibly young and fashionable. That's right, sister. So so it's so important, to continue to put forth the voices of people of color and marginalized people in this movement. And I think we're being heard. It's happening.
Thanks, Sonia. And before I ask you one last question, I just wanted to encourage anyone from the audience for the last 10 minutes. We'll take some questions from the audience, and you can just go and submit your question to dxe.io/question, and it'll pop up over here on my phone. So please do that soon, and I will read them off, and we'll ask those questions. So don't raise your hand, just go to dxe.io/question. If you don't have a phone, you can ask someone next to you to submit on your behalf. But yeah, I was going to ask, any last thoughts about anything that you wanted to share but couldn't? Anyone who wants to jump in, just go ahead and say what you're thinking or feeling.
I want to say one thing about how excited I am about the right to rescue legislation. This needs to be written into law that people can go into these places, take footage, rescue animals if need be without fear of criminal or civil prosecution. It's so important, and I think what it is, it's a whistleblower law. I myself practice whistleblower law, and this is an issue of public concern. People need to know what's happening behind closed doors, and we didn't get a chance to talk much about Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act, and the fact that you can be criminalized for taking a picture of an animal farm, or ranch, or whatever they're calling it, when you're not even on the property. So I'm really excited about this particular move from DxE. The fur ban shows that we have the power, and that we have power in the legislature. Like I was talking about, I do believe the people are behind us. And I keep floating this to DxE, and maybe it'll happen, but I would love to see a California ballot initiative for the right to rescue, because that would be mind-blowing. And I think we could win. And wait, that's very expensive. It would be incredible. And like I said, I do think, people are understanding how important it is that we have whistleblowers who are protected, who can stand up and speak out for people's rights and animal rights.
Thank you, Sonia. And I think we will. I mean, I wake up every morning and I start off my day saying, DxE will establish the right to rescue. I actually posted on my Facebook page this morning because that's the first thing that I thought.
I want to throw something out there. And again, this is kind of bigger picture. This is a great big picture organization here. But the idea of a right to rescue is terrific. Right? If we can do that, you will have accomplished something incredible and way ahead of your time. Which is not to say that the time is not now, because it is. But the best thing about this group of people right here is that you're not waiting for the law. You do what is right now. You do what is right because it is right, because it's what you believe in. I read in the news yesterday some secret poll among Republican senators that 35 would vote to impeach Trump if only their votes could be secret. And that's because the people in power are unwilling to do the right thing if they have to suffer the political consequences for it. You have decided to do the right thing, well knowing the consequences of it. And it gives me goosebumps to think about that. Every tremendous evil that has ever been perpetrated by mankind on this planet has happened because good people did nothing. Every bit. And somehow, this group congealed and became an organism of its own that was unwilling to let that happen where you cared most. Despite the consequences. Despite the consequences. You do what is right despite the consequences. So if we can get it codified, if we can have a right to rescue, great. But you can't wait for the government to tell you it's okay. You can't wait for Big Ag to say what you're doing is okay. You can't wait for the rest of society to tell you that it's okay. You have to follow your heart and do what is right now. And then, if you do, they'll follow. They're just waiting for your leadership.
We got 22 questions, so I'm going to do my best to get at least.
And they're all for Ivan.
Whoever wants to take this can answer it. But one of the questions here is, what is DxE not doing currently that you think that we should be doing? And as activists in this audience, if you had to give all of the people here one advice as lawyers that you haven't had the chance to, what would that be? Anyone can take it.
Well, I think DxE is amazing and doing such incredible work. And one thing that I think would be exciting would be connecting more with labor unions, particularly, here in California, we have so much animal ag production, and there are some places that are unionized by United Farm Workers, and maybe there is this work happening. But I would love to see more about us talking about how slaughterhouse workers and production workers are also impacted what's happening, the chemicals they have to experience. So I think that would be exciting, but I'm so impressed. I'm so honored that I even get to work for you.
I think Wayne's article in the New York Times, is it already a few months ago, is a perfect example of what we need to do more. I find when I try to do vegan outreach, as soon as I say the V word, people's eyes roll back in their head and they start to walk away. So I've started now to approach people from in terms of a health perspective. If you read Wayne's amazing article, Stealing Lori, in the New York Times, he didn't say the V word once. But I can tell you, so many people remarked to me after that article, wow, I had no idea that our food was so filled with antibiotics. I thought by eating free-range beef, there was no hormone or anything bad in my food. So I think we have to accept that we may have to try different approaches for different groups of people while staying true to our beliefs. So If the V word scares people, talk about how tainted the food supply is. Talk about how the Chinese own a huge part of our food supply. But we could do outreach a million different ways. And what's amazing about DxE is that we do outreach with kindness. I can't tell you if I read one more exchange about why we hate the impossible versus the beyond, because I just want people to eat less animals and just be kind about the way you approach people, because if you scare them off, they're going to walk away. And what DxE is really good about doing is doing outreach with kindness.
And I'd add something that on, and that's that for people who have watched the left and progressive movements over the years, everyone who is paying any attention to it, especially from the inside, will tell you that the biggest enemy of the left sometimes becomes the left. Right? And that it's the Impossible Burger versus the Beyond Burger versus, well, you didn't. And it's, we need to be as inclusive as possible. And that's for this organization, it's for any organization. And in your quest for perfection, and thank you for including me here, because I am so far from perfect. We can have people, we can lose people that could be really tremendous assets to what we're doing moving forward. Not just in the animal rights movement, but also in just, moving humanity towards a better place generally.
So there's a question here. I actually haven't heard of this, but maybe you all have, and I thought it was interesting, so I'll ask. How does the legal concept of stepping into the shoes of the victim apply to open rescue cases?
Is there actual, I have never heard of, I think it's an appealing argument, especially in front of a jury, to put yourself in the shoes, to say to the jury, put yourself in the shoes of the brutally mistreated bird or beauty, but I don't know of any legal concept that offers it as a legal defense.
And it would generally be a very objectionable argument, especially in a criminal case, to say, how would you feel if this happened to you? That's just a good way to get shut down by the judge. However, it's a really valuable emotional appeal, and it can be made in ways that wouldn't be objectionable and certainly valuable that way.
Maybe what the person is referring to is the eggshell argument, which is something, it's like you have to think about the way that person is impacted. So if you say you drove a car towards someone really quickly and then stopped and they had a heart attack, you have to think about the damages of that person as somebody who is prone to heart attacks. So maybe that's what's happening. But I do think the whole idea about, it's really important that we do start to bring into our trials, civil trials anyway, expert opinions on animal sentience, so that we can talk to juries about, hey, these are their own beings, they have their own lives, families, languages, and definitely make that happen. And we've had a lot of really cool people step up to be those experts, and I think that might happen in the January trial. If opposing counsel is listening, kick your ass.
So in January, we're going to be going to have a preliminary hearing for the Petaluma poultry case, where 6 defendants, including myself, are facing felony charges. That's what somebody is talking about. So one last question that I'll ask is, from a legal perspective, how can we better support activists facing charges?
I want to jump on that.
Yes.
So I've taken some of these phone calls, and I love it when people talk to me about how do we limit our exposure. We know it's risky what we're going to do, but how do we limit it? And I can tell, we can have these great conversations. That means that if you're going to go out there and get engaged in an activity where you know there's a risk of arrest, let's make this arrest for misdemeanor instead of felony, right? So engaging with subject matter experts in the location, where an action is going to take place, ahead of time. That becomes the ounce of prevention, right? That is worth so much more in the long run. So when activities are planned and you have counsel locally that you trust, and you can say, how do we limit our exposure? All right? Now, lawyers are not allowed to counsel people on how to commit crimes. We're not. And that's not what we'll do. We'll say, this is how you make sure you don't commit more crimes than necessary, or don't expose yourself to the risk of arrest. for more crimes than absolutely necessary. So involve lawyers in the planning processes leading up to direct actions that could have legal consequences.
And I'm just going to jump in on this one because I was recently asked for some advice for a potential New York action. Don't tell the lawyers what you're planning, because you don't want to end up accidentally making your lawyer a co-conspirator. You need your lawyer, and sometimes less is more. So we can advise you, and Priya and Wayne and Mira and Eva especially, Eva, we miss you if you're watching from London, have set up group chats, and they're a really valuable way for you all who put your lives and liberty on the line to reach out us all and ask questions, and we're there. Our job is to support you. I don't consider myself an activist. I assume one day I'm going to be called at the Rikert trial. So if you guys are listening, if you ask me, am I an activist? No, my answer is, I'm a lawyer for activists. My job is to tell them what the law is and to support them legally. And I think all of us, and all your other wonderful lawyers that are helping, Isaac is right. Consult us early and often. We'll give you the best advice we can to help you minimize risks. We can't help you plan. We still want our bar licenses so we can represent you, but we can certainly advise you as to how. Recently I got excellent questions about what if someone is not a legal permanent resident, or they are a legal permanent resident. What about going to Canada? It's only right that you all know that you're fully informed of what the possible consequences are. And every day a new one pops up. We had one about 6 or 7 months ago where someone was going to take a diversion, which is basically you walk away, but it would have cost that person her job at a financial institution. So the more you tell us about yourselves, the more we can evaluate the individual risk for every one of you, because no one at DxE wants anyone to take the risk of being arrested if you're not fully prepared.
Well, thank you all so much. With that, we're going to end this panel. I was going to ask one last question, which is, do you all think I can be a lawyer? Totally. You were one.
No.
I appreciate Isaac for being honest. Thank you all so much. Priya. Everyone here, because I know it's not just me and Wayne and other people that you're helping. You're helping so many other people, and there's honestly not that many lawyers in the animal rights movement who are, helping activists and indirectly or directly helping animals. So please give a huge round of applause to our amazing panelists here. And if you all can, from our social media team, share this panel so that more prosecutors in Sonoma County can watch it. Go to Facebook and on Direct Action Everywhere. This was all live streamed, so please share it and use the ALCC hashtag. And if you all can, if you're thinking, how can I support defendants like myself and other people who are facing felony charges in DxE for exposing crimes that are happening behind these closed doors, and honestly continue to do this work. Like if we go to jail, like what Isaac said, what Sonia said, what Bonnie said, we need to continue this movement with more leaders, and that's why you all are here today. But if you can spare a few dollars every month, you can become a monthly member. You can talk to Miriam in the back, and seriously, $3 a month